Clean!
For those of you who aren't from the UK or even London really, you probably don't know what a roadman is. Really, long story short, a roadman is just a man that's on road. Someone who's about and active in the area. You're gonna see them by Tesco's, you're gonna see them outside your yard, you're gonna see them outside the GP. It's basically someone who's big. And when we think of the roadman, we're not really just thinking of a guy you see a lot. You're thinking of him. Black Air Forces, night tech, puffer jacket, Bally, and they all talk like this.
Allow it, cuz, man. Not now, fam.
What kind of mental health problem?
There's a cadence and aesthetic, but let's be real, this aesthetic is mostly tied to young black British men.
That's the thing still. It's my big brothers though, innit? So don't use no bullets, because they'll find out and beat us all up. Especially you, fam.
When I saw the Stormzy McDonald's commercial, one of the first things I thought was, oh wow, they appropriated his whole thing. The joke is, you don't expect white British people to be speaking like this. So there's this big inversion when it does happen. If it needs to be stated, roadmen are synonymous with black British men, which is ironic because a lot of the time I see white people trying to replicate this aesthetic.
Work on G, man's gonna spit some bars in it. Proper tunes, you get me? Anyway.
This wouldn't be such a big deal if these ideas didn't bleed into the media that black British people often receive, and ultimately the types of representation were provided. Not to say that there isn't the occasional supercell or wealthy black fantasy, but a lot of the time it's either from the perspective of the police investigating crime or the black boy committing the crime, and the fantasies involved in that. And I specifically say fantasies because that's a huge part of how this aesthetic has been commercialized. And I think that's a pretty good place to start. To understand why blackness is depicted this way, we need to take a step back and look at our language within the UK. First of all, to give credit where credit's due, MLE or BBE is like an amalgamation of different cultures and their dialect. It draws from the Caribbean and a lot of West African cultures. So a lot of the language I talk about here isn't coming inherently from black Londoners, but more that this is the type of language that's kind of normalized within our culture. Let's start with something like Badman. You're a bad man, yeah? You think you're bad. I'm going to explain this like an idiot, but I'm doing it so you can follow along here. The book Blacklisted has a really good definition of this, but the bad man is essentially the black archetypical outlaw. The bad man is the archetypical outlaw, the man who lives by his own code, commands the respect of his peers, and flouts convention. The bad man makes his own rules, and like Billy Zane in the Titanic, creates his own luck. It is the pure blunt machismo, equating law-breaking with strength. Originating from Jamaica in the 1970s, Badman has unfolded the black British culture through the West Indian diaspora, most visibly through music and associated subcultures, namely ragga, dancehall, and most recently, grime. It's something you can call someone else, but not something to ever assign to yourself.
Think you're a bad man, yeah? Go on then, shoot me.
Listen!
No one says, I'm a bad man, at least not like that. You go, are you bad? Or bad man like you, yeah? In that sense, Badman functions in a similar way to the N-word, not in the cultural significance I need to stress, but in how it's only used to celebrate your proximity to criminality, or to bring attention to the fact that someone is acting bad, or testing your ability to see that they're being rude. As it stands, to be a bad man is no longer strictly an accusation of criminality, it's an accolade of the highest order. The fact that Badman is now an accolade speaks to how black masculinity is still tied, in part, to being bad. The problem with the black outlaw archetype is that it reinforces the notion that black masculinity is inherently criminal. The badman concept supports a narrative that racist ideology has constructed since the black migration spiked in the UK, that black men are a dangerous threat to mainstream society. The badman's origins are unquestionably black, so the roadman, an extension of the badman, is undeniably black too. Words like sideman, bossman, even mandem, it's all really in relation to hierarchy and status. If it wasn't obvious, very focused on man, very mandem adjacent. It's interesting that this is the language that stuck. This language mostly framed around masculinity and criminality. We can even take the word yardie. A roadman is like a diluted outsider's idea of a yardie. The yardie is an encapsulation of the fears surrounding black British masculinity in my lifetime. It's an status gunman obsessed with cars and jewelry. speaking in broken English from a former colony, completely unconcerned with the safety of the majority of the white public. There's a borderline haunting BBC article about this dating back from 1999. It says, "Who are the Yardies? They drive top-of-the-range BMWs, flaunt designer gold jewelry, and carry automatic guns as a weapon of choice." It goes on to demonize this group and cite gun violence that went down. But what's fascinating is that distinction. Among Jamaicans, a Yardie is just another Jamaican. But historically in the UK, it was a sign that you're in a gang. And that disconnect is interesting, and how the roadman has become the black British neutral term for a Yardie. All this language is carrying blackness in its origin, but is being repackaged into criminality. Why? Black British identity is viewing Britishness from the perspective of blackness. And when you take this language from different black cultures and view it from a British lens, the product is always going to be this overtly violent idea of black masculinity. Not inherently because that's what it is, but because that's how we're being perceived. But why is it so easy to commercialize this aesthetic? Whether it's in primary school, secondary school, or some of you might even went sixth form, we are taught in these academic institutions to be uniform. You wear the same blazer every day, you wear the same tie, you change your white shirts, you wear a skirt or trousers, and then you get to pick between a set of work shoes, and you do that every day for the first 16 years of your life. Britain is very uniform because we are taught to be uniform. Standing out isn't really that cool or really encouraged. Our institutions very much do speak to it. Enter the tracksuit.
You're not hench, you're not bad. You just screw up your face all weird. Trying to get hype off me, trying to get hype off me, you jumped out the whip, no one ran, nobody cares.
Now, tracksuits gained popularity in the 1968 Olympics. John Carlos and Tommy Smith were wearing matching tracksuits, raising their fists during the award ceremony. Now, true to form, a bunch of fashion companies like Adidas ended up seeing the bag and releasing a full line of clothing trying to bite off this aesthetic. And with a strong enough marketing campaign, it works. And now everyone is wearing Nike Tech. Fast forward to the UK with the rise of the grime scene. Some of the most foundational and iconic UK grime freestyles in music were made in these tracksuits. Shut Down by Skepta, Shut Up by Stormzy. And because of that cultural influence, we now have everybody wearing their own tracksuit. And while there are variations from time to time, this very uniform look was formed to speak to something else. See, the tracksuit in a way is the antithesis of the blazer and suit you're taught to wear your entire life. It's comfortable, it's sleek, and it's easy to just throw on. And given how tied it is to sports and the very strong sports culture within the country, it works as a logical antithesis derivative of the culture.
When I was on the streets out here, that's where I just learned all the style. Like, I used to come up here in like Air Force Ones and that. They made me just switch up that whole shit and then like get into like shocks, into like black windbreakers, and like the whole style that I've adopted like in the past couple years is definitely based on like Manchester, Liverpool style.
In Shut Down by Skepta, there's a bar where he says, "Fashion week and it's shut down. Went to the show sitting in the front row in the black tracksuit and it's shut down." He said this in reference to the fashion week he went to and the tracksuit that was shown off in his deal. The point being that showing up in a tracksuit was a statement in itself. Is the idea that wearing a tracksuit is checking the establishment. That what it means to wear a tracksuit is to not fit in, is to prioritize your comfort over where you think you're going. This ultimately did end up resonating with a large subsection of London's marginalized groups, namely Black British people. For those that don't believe me, let's take something as simple as going to a motive or going out to a club with your friends. What's the one rule? No tracksuits. Security will stop you. There are no tracksuits in this establishment. It's why when you do invite your friends out, when they show up in a tracksuit, it's really frustrating. It's quite overtly stigmatized socially, even down to romantics. I remember a friend having to tell me, and it's not uncommon, if you're going to see that girl, don't wear a tracksuit. She won't think you're serious. And what does that say culturally? What does it say about the tracksuit and the roadman and the badman that we all identify as black and operates and exists within that space? Well, we get this idea, this aesthetic, this parody-like replication in the media. One of the first questions I was asked when I showed off my game, set in South London and from the perspective of Black British characters, was, "This looks great, but where's the roadman?" And I always felt like I had to do something with it. It's a massive part of Black British media and culture. But I started to slowly really understand the question. Where's the caricature of Black British masculinity? Where's the stand-in parody for everything that Britain cannot stand? And the more I thought about it, the more I started to think of what role this roadman is playing in British media and representation. Let's take this article, and it's an exploration into the idea of how roadmen represent ideas of black masculinity and lad culture represents ideas of British masculinity. It's a really good read if you're interested. It'll be cited in the description. But my main focus here is how the roadman is described. Similarly, roadmen masculinity elucidated in grime and UK drill music presents sexual interaction as the only acceptable interaction between women and men, with no sense of emotional vulnerability allowed. He goes on, the roadman holds up money and material possessions, particularly cars, designer clothes, jewelry, as their ultimate aspirations, plus consumption of lavish alcohol and large quantities of weed. Moreover, despite not caring about girls, they see their interest in them as a demonstration of masculinity, with a focus on superficial aspects of being light-skinned, having a big back, etc. So it's not even a secret. This is something that we all understand is a construct derivative of black masculinity, one that has been criminalized and reduced to a misogynistic, materialistic, short-sighted fool.
Industries are
Or the football industry, or the music industry, or the pimping industry. YOLO, baby!
I remember watching Kidulthood in Peckham. Never go to Peckham, by the way. It's awful. I know they've gentrified Peckham, but that doesn't mean anything. Don't go to Peckham. Kidulthood was great because I was entrenched in that secondary school culture. That this was funny. I saw the new one with my partner, and I couldn't believe it. It was the same thing. The roadman has been the same thing in almost everything it's been depicted in, and I think it's worth questions about how the media has selectively chosen this to be the depiction of black British people that gets the most attention. This caricature of black British masculinity, a word that derives from black origin, has now taken shape into an on-screen character trope, and I think that's worth examining what that says about how the British media, and by extension the wider world, views us. But this doesn't mean that the roadman has no place in our media. The roadman aesthetic has been demonized for a reason. It's stigmatized in social spaces for a reason. It stands in complete opposition with ideas of British culture, that culture being uniform and subservient to British social norms without issue. It is a completely self-serving move to show up in a tracksuit. You prioritize your own comfort in where you're going, proud of your blackness. In the face of the uniformity you've been taught in your life, we've created a new uniformity in opposition, which is just as beautiful as it is painful, because I'm sure Nike made bare money off us. You might never think about that. In that breath, the roadman can be a construct of something revolutionary too, kind of like a revolutionary roadman. It's a role that has existed for a while, but it doesn't have to keep playing to these toxic ideas of black men in our media. And don't get me wrong, there is a responsibility on us to challenge our ideas of patriarchy and normalize misogyny. But it's really interesting that this is the only idea of black British identity that has seen mainstream notoriety. One that we all understand is a construct and parody of black Britishness. Just as there needs to be a cultural shift, there needs to be a media shift in how the roadman is depicted. In the Evening Standard article, David Coachman asks a former gang member, Wayne, about it. He explains the different levels at play. The lowest is a roadman. He's the guy with a handbag, always on road, dealing drugs. The roadman is the one that no one rates. We all understand that socially and culturally. But I don't think feeding into that persecution of the roadman helps the situation either. Because what other history do we have in the black British media? We're playing the police. We play the enforcers of Britain's rule over the country, often persecuting our own constructs of the roadman. We need to challenge the idea that being on road is a bad thing, that engaging in our communities is inherently a bad thing, and we also need to stop criminalizing it. Not everyone on road is trying to hurt you. Down Bermondsey, I know two twins. These men are always on road, but they're not shotting, they're just active. We catch up for like 2 minutes and then we move on. But because they're black, bait, and in a tracksuit, that suddenly means they're roadmen, because they're too active when they shouldn't be. I know so many people that had to fight for the freedom to even leave their homes, to be in community with their black friends, because bare people are sheltered from young. We don't trust our communities. We don't trust that roadman. And it's that fear. And we know why that fear exists. Joint Culpability Acts. It's legal for the UK Met Police to arrest and try multiple people if they can, make the argument that you're affiliated with them within your community. Meaning, your friend could get tried for theft or murder, and they can bring you in because you're friends and make that case that you're part of the gang. And a gang is a criminalized friendship. It is a criminalized community. So the system sets up a lack of community. It pushes you away from other black people by criminalizing ideas of black British identity and by extension, solidarity. But it's in learning that the roadman is a construct of the media that we can begin to change the media and our culture. That the roadman doesn't have to exist as the lowest a man can be. It can be a symbol, as it always has been, of defiance to British uniformity. Instead of demonizing the effects of being on road, celebrate the stories of joy that these people have brought our communities. I have a close friend near Burgess that comes through with a giant speaker wherever he goes. He is too big. But he creates crowds, he does music requests, it's sick, Then there's the Peckham pimps. They're just running around dressed as pimps, trying to make people smile. There's so much more to being on road in the UK, being bait, and I think we should celebrate this more. There is community here. We just have to trust them and not the media. The roadman doesn't have a problem unless you have a problem with the roadman. And I don't have a problem with stories from the perspective of the roadman. I just want them to be framed from a more sincere perspective, because the roadman isn't always on road because he's doing something dodgy. Some people are just bait because they're in their communities more. And that's not something that we should collectively demonize. Especially if you're trying to reach your communities, you have to realize you have a lot more in common with the roadman than you may think.